So my name is Tim, on board, and I'll be doing this workshop with you. It is really nice to see quite a lot of faces I've not seen before. Because for a very long time, I just felt like I'm saying the same thing to the same people. So, hello, my name is Tim, nice to meet you. What should I say? The accent is Dutch, yeah? Don't worry. If you struggle understanding me, please let me know. Sometimes I speak a little quick. The other thing that's good to know is that my background professionally is in mental health. So I'm a mental health nurse. I've worked since 2003 in mental health care, mental health wards in the Netherlands, in France, and then now here in Sheffield. So I would say I've done it for a while. And next to that, I've done a lot of work around training. So maybe mental health first aid, or your workshops and trainings around mental health and Christianity. Currently, I mainly work as a chaplain in those same mental health wards, which is the best job in the world. Can't say that enough. Basically, I'm still in the place that I want to work. This time I can actually have conversations with people rather than running around and giving medication. So it's way, way better. That's my background. And with that background, I've been in the situation also of being a youth worker, doing a lot of therapy groups with patients, and one of the things I've actually never really spoken about in those workshops is how I use stories with people to make sense of their surroundings and their experience, which is really interesting, because over there you've got out of the box. Over there, hello. And I use some of that, a little bit of that, on mental health wards quite often with people to help make sense of their experience of mental ill health. And as we all know, mental ill health happens to all of us, or can happen to all of us, whether we are Christian or not. And this workshop is really about how do we have conversations, what can we use for conversations, and specifically what stories can we use for conversations with young people to think about their mental health, to talk about mental health, but also to help them make sense of what's happening to them. And that's probably the most important part. The most important part about this workshop is about sense making. Sense making in the sense that I'm trying to make sense of the situation I've been in by referring to something else. Yeah? So a good example would be, I've not thought of an example, have I? I've not thought of an example. I thought of the next step, nothing of this one. You know what I mean, right? So I have been, for instance, I've had a depression myself years ago. I didn't know what it would be like to live with depression. I knew theoretically what it meant, but I didn't know what it was like to live with. Later on, I equated it with saying, well, it is like being in a padded room. Everything comes in, but it feels like there's a distance between you and other people. Yeah? I'm trying to make sense by using the padded room to explain something I'm experiencing. Another thing it does, is using the stories, is to give voice to something that is hard to grasp. We all have had things in our life where we've been in a situation and we would like to communicate that to someone, but we don't know what the words are for it. And sometimes we don't even know how to describe it to ourselves. A good example in the Bible for that is when Jesus uses parables, trying to describe something by using something else. Okay. Sense making is incredibly important for someone's journey about mental health. Those of you who know me have probably heard me speak about mental health first aid, and about illness, and about taking care and how to support people, and all those things are really, really important. But the truth is, that is not enough. That is not enough. There's a whole process someone goes through when they experience mental health. And For young people, especially as they might go through their first experience, it is all a lot rawer, a lot more of sense-making needs to happen because it's all new. I don't know what to do with it, I don't know where to go with it, I don't know what feelings belong here, is there something wrong with me, is this right? All those questions. That is where stories come in. At work, in the hospital, I use stories with people, like out of the box, other stories, to try and make sense of their experience of mental health, try and make sense of their experience of what happens to their surrounding. Because of stigma, our surrounding response, we say we fuck up. You have, for instance, in depression, struggling with anxiety, our surrounding starts treating us different. Even with the best intentions, it's not a bad thing, it's just a fact of what happens. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Stories. That was the introduction. I hope it makes sense. Yeah? Are you in the right place? Good. Stay. I want to say something about the medical model when we talk about healthcare and mental ill health. What I'm going to say doesn't take away the importance of the medical model. If someone has a mental illness, struggling with mental health, professional help is important, and I will always say that. But it's also not enough. There are a lot of things where the medical model struggles. If you got any idea when the medical model comes up short, struggles when it comes around mental health care? The spiritual side, yeah. Spiritual side quite often is not used at all. That's why we've got joy. What else? Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you might not know it. Yeah. I thought you were going to say something else, which was also good. Anyone else? It's sort of
like existential questions like what is my purpose?
Yeah. Would you answer that? Good. Yeah. Underlying things. There's a big theme. The way our medical model works is that we see symptoms, something's wrong, feeling bad, you might hear voices, you are anxious, all kind of symptoms, and that's what we see. We tell them together, and then someone of a degree knows what they're doing, says, well, you have X, Y, Z, and then we're going to treat X, Y, Z. But perhaps, quite often, at the roots of mental ill health, emotional well-being, etc., are bigger events. Yeah, there is maybe something of where am I? What am I doing here? What is my purpose in life? Maybe it is my relationship broke up, and now I feel really rubbish. But it comes out as anxiety further down the line. Maybe I've lost my job. Maybe I've been surrounded with high stress, moving house. Maybe I've started studying. Maybe my parents divorced, etc., etc., etc. So there's lots of reasons that might be at the foundation. The medical model does very little with that. Psychology, really good. Psychology services try to work with that. So that's a good one. What else? Where else do we come up short? Thank you. Did everyone hear that? Yeah? It's my mistake, so.
Having time and community to be around someone for a long time.
Absolutely. And time and community, and another benefit of community is that you use your community around you, the people around you, to make sense of what's happening to you. So, it's a double effect. A really big part, yeah. One more.
Absolutely, and for sometimes professionals, practitioners might be so ready to infuse people with prescriptions and drugs and all kinds of things and forget about the fact that sometimes people just are suffering for various reasons. They've had a proper breakdown, they've lost their spouse, and so they're naturally suffering, but that giving people pills won't kind of change that circumstance.
Some of those therapies are wonderful, but most of them aren't. Most of them are rubbish. But they serve a purpose. You remind me of something else. Yes. Another downside is sort of over-diagnosing, the over-medicalization of our situations. Some things are just very normal. Yeah? And again, my background is medical, and I think the medical model has a really important place. Yeah, so I'm not saying you don't have to go there or find help, but there is the recognition that sometimes we go too far in it, and it comes from the medical world itself as well. There's that reflection is very much present. I hear that from my colleagues as well. So that's a good point as well. There are other points such as money. We have limited needs. Yeah? We don't have the right people. We don't really have enough professionals in the country to help people. So knowing all this helps us maybe to see where we could, with young people, with children, fill the gaps. And I think that stories can fill those gaps. Now, I am not going to tell you how to be a youth worker, a children's worker. I've done youth work only for a few years. I thought it was pretty good. But, I don't know, maybe you're much better than me. But what I would like to share with you is one of the things I do. So go through a Bible story with you, point a few ideas out, invite you to respond to that, so it's interactive. And then I'm going to give some other stories around the tables, and I want you to go through that same process. And I want you to find out together what there is in that story that might be significant for young people or children to understand around health, mental health, belonging, emotions. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. Just making sure I've not forgotten stuff. No? I'm good. Good. Okay. That's a joke, huh? It's not real. Don't worry. Don't worry. One of the stories I like using, and it's interesting, I was using this actually the other day, some of this with a person at the hospital, one of my colleagues, who she lost her friend, was also a neighbor, 35 years old, single mother, young child. Went to the doctor, didn't feel good, doctor sent her to the hospital was worried, did her test and said, she passed away. This colleague of mine, who was her best friend, she came to me and she was really upset because she said she prayed, she'd been a Catholic her whole life, her friend was a Catholic her whole life, we prayed together. Why? And why doesn't God change it? I think we all understand that, yeah? We all have our own situations of why. Yeah? Just like the young people and children we support, we have to why questions. And I didn't sit down and tell her the story of Jonah, as I'm going to do with you. But we did come to the story of Jonah very naturally. And there is something in the story of Jonah about coming to terms with reality that isn't the way we want it. And it doesn't feel right. And anger disappointment, etc., etc. So, this is the story of Jonah. Sit down, close your eyes, no, don't close your eyes, you fall asleep. I apologize if it's a bit much of a sermon. This part is a little bit sermon-like, so hang in there with me. Quick question. So embarrassed, I only found out this a few years ago. Story of Jonah, what happens? In a nutshell, someone can explain it to me? What happens? Very quick. He gets swallowed by a whale. Yeah, or a big fish. What happens next? And then? That's what I thought. Yeah, I think it's very angry. And then there's a really interesting conversation. I'm trying to find out my thread piece of paper as well. Okay, you might get lucky, you might get on 2 pieces of paper instead of 3. Okay, good. So yeah, Jonah gets swallowed by the whale, he doesn't do what God says, and then, he's trying to defend the city, and God says, oh, Nineveh, etc., etc., and then he gets swallowed by the fish, he gets spat out, and then follows this interesting dialogue between Jonah and God. Jonah says, look, I prayed, this is what I said, Lord, when he was still at home, tried to prevent, this fleeing that I did, and you're a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. So Jonah has this conversation with God. And God says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something different here. And Jonah has this line saying, now Lord, take away my life. It's better for me to die than live. It's really dramatic. That's a bit how this conversation starts. I don't know, that's normally not how a conversation starts. This is how this conversation starts. And interestingly enough, instead of God responding to his whole drama of going, not going, being swallowed by the whale, the anger, the disappointment of Jonah, God asked this question, is it right for you to be angry? And that's where the conversation gets interesting. And Jonah, being upset, disappointed, goes and sits down. That is the east of the city, where Jonah lives. And he makes himself a shelter for the shade. And then he's going to wait and see what happens to the city. Then God provides, as it's called, a leafy plant, and makes it grow so that Jonah can sit in the shade, and so that his head is at ease and discomfort from the sun. And Jonah was very happy about that. But then at dawn, the next day, God provided a worm, and the worm chewed the plant, and the plant withered. And the sun rose, and God provided scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head, so that he grew faint, and that he said that he wanted to die. He said it would be better for me to die than to live. And God says, Jonah, is it right for you to be angry about that? Did you know this part of the story? It's interesting, we never talk about that. I like this part very much. Jonah doesn't agree with God, and doesn't agree with what God is doing. Yeah? And Jonah's upset. But instead of God explaining to Jonah why he does what he does, because that's what the story is about. Instead of saying to Jonah why he did this, and why he did that, and why he made certain choices, he says to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry? And then he shows him there's a plant that gives shade, and a worm that eats the plant, and the shade goes away. There's something about God does these things I don't know why. God doesn't explain why he does these things. He just shows that there is new life and that life goes. And Jonah says, oh, I'm so angry. I wish I was dead. And then God said, you have been so concerned about this plant, but you did not make it. You did not grow it. It sprang up overnight and it died. That's what God says, you're Jonah. And then it says, should I not have concern for the people of Nineveh? Because there are many, there's so many, and should I worry about them? Okay, that was the story. Hang on. What I find interesting, and what I think the story talks about here, is that there's a situation where Jonah is very upset with God. And Jonah is angry. He's a bit dramatic. And he wants explanation. And God doesn't explain it to him. Just like God doesn't explain to us why things happen and why things don't happen. You don't get an explanation. Do you have an explanation? I don't have an explanation. What God does say is that God shows that he grows and he takes. And nature is like that. The world we live in is like that. And it has nothing to do with us. We don't have a say in it, in how the world works. I find this a really difficult story of Jonah. And I wonder what you think about this story. What is it about this story? What is God trying to say? What's happening here? I'm asking you because I don't know. No, I've got a solution. I'm going back to this colleague of mine I spoke to the other day. She went through a situation where she lost someone and she didn't know why. And she didn't understand why God did this or why God would allow this. And she didn't agree with God. In fact, she was really angry with God. Just like Jonah, really angry, really upset, disagreeing why God does things like that. What do we say to young people or children when they confront us with questions like that? Do we have an answer? And I'm asking you. I only did it for 3 years.
Yeah, you can't really have an answer for any question, but I think God will answer your questions in time, and it's just a matter of when that's going to happen.
It's a real good answer. Yeah. What else do we know that we could say to young people and children?
Sometimes we might never know why. That seems really unhelpful, doesn't it? It's like not offering much hope. I feel like as Christians we like to give hope, and there is hope that Jesus is with us in it, but at the time we don't know why that's happened. We might never know.
And I think that's a really good, that's a really honest response, isn't it? I think that's true. I think it's true.
I think as well it's important for young people to see that we don't have all the answers. And actually, when we are honest and say, yeah, we can't really explain that, and like you said, it's I think it's that's a really honest answer, and people respect that. We don't always have the answers.
I agree. Really good. What do we do what we do as humans when we come into a situation where something goes wrong, where we fail, is that quite quickly we start judging. What do we start judging? So judging yourselves. And sorry? Oh, yeah, and we do that as well. We like judging other people, but what we do is judge ourselves a lot, consciously and unconsciously, in the sense that we might give ourselves the sentence like, I think that might be my fault, or if I wouldn't have done that, then maybe. Or I knew I wasn't good enough for that. Or I knew I couldn't do that. Or, you see, I knew I wasn't good enough. Those are the narratives we tell ourselves. Everyone, by the way. That's right. I didn't make it up. It's very clear. It's very clear. It's one of the reasons why we have CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. What it does is trying to pull those narratives out of us and say, this is actually true, this is correct. And then we say, no, actually, no, you're right, it's not correct. And we put it back together. And then hopefully we feel better. That's how CBT works. For me, when I hear this story, I can get, on one hand, very upset with myself sometimes, if something goes wrong. And I've got lots and lots of questions, of course, why he has done what he has done, or why things are as they are. And what I like about the story, of course, is that God doesn't get drawn into the drama. God just asks the question, Jonah, is it okay for you to be angry? And then God says, Jonah, have you taken care of this plant? Have you made it grow? Have you taken care of it? Are you the one who's in control? Or am I? That is what I hear in the story. And it sounds maybe a bit strange, but let it sit for a while. Because I think as human beings, we feel like we are in control of what happens around us, or we are in control of the narrative. I think there's something very liberating about accepting that although I don't know what happens, the responsibility is not with me. I can only do work. The responsibility of what happens to me in my life is not with me. I can only decide what I do. To an extent. So that is how I find the story helpful for myself. Now this is a really difficult story. I didn't want to leave the story, but I did because I had this conversation a few days ago, so that's why they're easier stories. The other thing that's important is that I have looked at the story from... Sorry? Yeah. No, not exclusively. No, not at all. Not at all. But I do think, or I do know, that a very common theme around mental health is the question why. And why is something happening? Why is this happening to me? Especially for people who are Christian or of another religion. So that is why. The final thing to say is that this story, what I've just told you, is all about me. And about how I look at the story. And the things that came out of it for me. For me, what I said was really important. For you, it might not be important. And that is where the exercise comes in if young and children. There is, I'm going to give you the stories in a moment. And what I would like you to challenge with is not to look at the stories with a sort of a theological knowledge, although you can't separate that. But I want you to look at it with creativity. Because when I take a story, whether I do it on board, I've done it with young people, I'll put a story out and I say, what do you think about the story? And then we have a conversation about what we can find in the story, what it tells us. And it's a process of creativity. And it's that same creativity which is part of the sense making, of processing of what is happening to me. So we'll do that. And then I'm curious what you come up with, and then we'll feed it back. And then maybe have a bit of a chat about it. Is that okay? Are you still with me? It was a long sermon, Mark, wasn't it? It's the reason why I don't do that. Good. How many tables are? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables? You're a very big table. A couple of you might want to come to this table. Would you like that? Would you like some people to join me? It's something like that. That would be nice. And then, maybe, Alex, could you put some pens around on the table so you say, is that okay? Thank you. Yeah. So, really important about this exercise that whatever comes up is okay. Yeah? Don't let a silly thought just because it is silly go to waste. Because silly thoughts can be really constructive and helpful for giving meaning to what's happening to you. So we've got a few stories, a few different stories. Okay, 10 minutes, read it, and then brainstorm as a table and see what is in there that might be helpful or constructive to your mental health. And look at it from a broad sense, yeah? It doesn't have to directly remind you of mental health. Okay, shall we go over the exercise and then we're going to do something with it. I'm just really curious what I'm trying to listen into the tables left and right. And it's nice. The first thing I notice is how different you all go about it, which is really important. It's really important. Again, this is not about theological correctness or about what we should think. This is about a creative process of taking a story, going through a story, and letting everyone bring to the table verbally or to themselves what might be resonating with the story. And that's what this is about, because the creative process of doing that is very therapeutic. Yeah? It's really helpful. Next to that, it gives lots of insight. So, first thing to say is that I saw lots of different ways of going about it, which is great. It's a diversity in creativity there. Maybe from every table, you can share maybe 2 things, and if possible, could be one of those 2 things, something a bit outlandish, the most outlandish thing you came up with, if you didn't write it down. Yeah? It doesn't matter. It's not about theology. It's not that this exercise is about. Else I wouldn't be here. Your people went back. They disappeared. It's the rest of the table. Oh, no problem. I'll go to the next table. I won't come back because things. Claire. Which story did you? Because there's one table has a double story. So 2 tables share 1 story. Which story did you have? Oh, I think you had the same table, same story as this table. Right. Okay, what of your table would like to share with us? One good thing about maybe me and then short. The volunteers. Maybe mention it.
Yeah, so we have the story of the paralysed man who was lowered through the roof by his friends that Jesus healed. And some of the things that we talked about were community and being alongside people and helping people to get help, and knowing where to take them for help. And we talked a bit about they didn't give up at the first difficulty. They kept pushing and so advocating for people when it's difficult. Sometimes it's simple, and Jesus is like, well, what's easier? So sometimes there is a simple answer. We talked about a lot of things. And be like specific help, not just let us know what we can do, but actually they went and did something practical and specifically helpful.
So, there's lots in the story, right? You can go on and on and on. So, if I would be sitting with your table, and the rest would exist, and just the five of us would be having this conversation, this group, youth group, whatever you want to call it. And you would say, what's the last thing you said? Oh yeah, so a specific help, more generic. You said something about practical use. At that moment at the table, I would probably ask the question, what would be a practical thing to help someone who is mentally distressed? Or someone who may say depression. What would be a practical thing? Right? You want to answer that? Yeah, go answer that.
I think even if you don't know how to help someone, just being there can still make that sort of difference.
Yes. Being alone, feeling disconnected, like I said in that room that I spoke about in the beginning, feeling disconnected is a huge thing. So absolutely. So good story, good thing. Did you have anything that came up and you thought that was actually quite crazy to say, quite weird thought? That's absolutely fine. Maybe it's just me hearing all these weird things. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to come back to you. You've done this story. Thank you for speaking to the microphone. Is there someone here who would like to have maybe definitely waiting for someone saying something weird?
We had a story of Hannah, Elkanah's wife, who couldn't have children, and she was desperate to have children, and ended up bargaining with God, making a vow that if He gave her a child, that she would give him to the Lord for the rest of his life. So one thing pulled out was that Hannah wanted to be remembered by God. She felt forgotten. And I don't think of anything terribly outlandish, but I'll pick one thing Hannah was doing. She wasn't eating. Her husband said, "Why are you not eating?" Perhaps she wasn't eating because she was punishing herself, because she felt that maybe there was something that she was doing that wasn't right. She was being punished in this way, so she was punishing herself. Maybe?
I think I wasn't there. I'm not a big reincarnation, so I assume I wasn't there. No, really important. You said something really important there, right? So pick up on the weird stuff. That's quite often important. There could be other reasons why she would eat. She would be upset, yeah? What else? Yeah, what else? Not enough energy to prepare your food. If you stop eating over and over again, that will happen. Yeah, so from other people, yeah. Attention from other people to a problem. Yeah. Yeah, you don't realize about this one. Yeah. Yeah, true. There's another reason. Fasting? Yeah, fasting. Fasting, right? It's because what's the idea behind fasting for her?
Different reasons to fast, but perhaps a biblical picture of fasting is specifically giving up food as a way to help yourself.
Yeah. So giving something up with the desire to receive a certain outcome, if you're honest, yeah? It's like a slot machine, but more respective. I mean it with respect, because fasting can be very respective, and I think it's a practice we don't really have very much in the West, but well, it's a current, so that. Yeah, really important. Interesting thing there as well. Now, I don't know if I cut it out of the story so that we know, but there was this confusion, perhaps it's just after this, where people are making fun of the fact that she's so distraught, think that she's grown. Does it say there in there? That it follows, anyway. I don't know if it's 17 that part of that. It's for the... Yeah, the husband's going to listen why should we make such a fuss. You've got me, ticket on the meal. But there was also this element of being so distraught, so completely distraught, that the look actually is wrong. It's ridiculous. Yeah? And actually, sometimes, if we're really honest, in our society, we're very good at hiding our deep feelings. But that is what truly being distraught looks like. It's horrible. Yeah? It's all over the place. It's messy. So there is something in there as well. There are lots of things in these stories, and I need to go on because of time. Tinkle and Jens, and then we go. Is there anything from your, what story did you have? Is there anything?
We had a story about Elijah running away from Jezebel after him killing people and praying she might do the same to him. We saw, I was thinking about how in this, God and the angel don't necessarily make a statement on how Elijah is struggling. They don't try and make him feel better. They don't try and belittle his pain and suffering because he wants to end his life. He doesn't want to eat and drink. But they just give him that encouragement, get out, eat and drink, do the support and how in churches a lot of people with mental illness and etc. feel misunderstood or not listening to, or they're inconvenient. But we can be like Victor and like God and be there to support them without judgment, without asking or telling them how they should feel.
Something outlandish about church isn't always ready to embrace vulnerable or suffering people. Very outlandish. Why? Okay, we'll have to discuss that one. Right, yeah. Also, listening, one thing on ways to help people with mental health or rather than magic cure is listening to them, one thing. People still have rights to be listened to, even though they've got mental health problems. It doesn't mean to say they're sort of less than people, or suddenly become people that have to be kind of put away or forgotten about. So we put something here in church. Sometimes people feel vulnerable, and that can make them feel that they don't belong, or that they somehow can't be part of the church membership, for instance. They don't blend in for one reason or another.
Okay. I like this one. It's quite so much describes.
So people can easily feel a bit misunderstood and possibly ignored at times, which won't help their mental health.
And especially after you said something in terms of, or at least that's what I heard, church isn't always that place, isn't always a welcoming place for many people. I remember doing this story with someone ages ago who, it was a group of one person was quite active in Brazil, and I don't know what the other name was a while ago, but one of them I remember He grew up, went to school, did all Bible things, church, and then he became involved in the Holy Spirit, and so never went to church again until he was found himself in the chapel at the hospital many years later. And we talked about a story that someone else said. It's so easy to help someone, isn't it? Sometimes it's just listening, giving them some food. I really like the idea that God listens and gives us food and nourishes us. This guy, I've never thought of God like that. And that stuck with me. I never thought of God like someone who nourishes, cares, and listens. That really stuck with me. We spoke afterwards, and I'm not going to go into that, but it's remarkable the discovery people come to 50 years into life. By the time it's a very powerful story. So resonates with what you said of him. This table, what did you have? What did you think?
We had creation, so God created the world in 6 days, and then on the 7th day, taking rest. So we had quite a few bits, to be fair. So we obviously like the fact around taking rest and actually not being silent, because God rests, the reaching control, and sort of the beauty of creation as well. I guess one thing we could argue is outlandish as saying like, where it says God is very pleased and how God is pleased with us. We had a chat about, sometimes you can feel like a really awful person, and like we all kind of everything can do wrong. So you could say maybe it's outlandish that God isn't pleased with us, but actually, that's great. It is even more with myself.
It's a big theme, isn't it? Think about remember the first time I heard this this person I was living in monastery, one of the monks teaching said, this part of the Bible is a bit like a bell, left and right. So God created the soul was good, God created the soul was good, and God created human beings, and it was very good. Yeah. It's the only one. It's very good. The job song that was ridiculous, because if I look around me, human beings do not so yeah? I'm not going to give you examples what you use. But it changes completely. When you know a person who's stuck in the gut of thinking, it's my fault, what have I done wrong to deserve this? See, I knew I couldn't do that. Yeah. And then hearing the words, God's word is very good. God is very good. Depends which translation you read. In English, there's other translations. Thank you, really. And it's interesting that you picked up on that. Because other people might never pick up on that. But it is about how many people pick things up. What does this creativity in our mind respond to when we talk about these stories? And that process in itself helps us to give meaning, also to find a place in things, and to store it, to find our experiences. We can't just keep walking on the emotions every day. It's too much. We need to store that a little bit. So that sense making that's happening is really important. I realized that now another person is on the table. What's happening with the table? It's a very nice day. We started with this story on that table, so it's nice to finish here. Do share with us.
So someone else came to and said, even the first time they went in through the roof and just trying to find a solution, even if it didn't work. And we also talked about how friends just brought him as he was, they never changed anything first. They just went straight down.
I like that. So two people important things. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if you've been in a situation where it's not just been difficult in life, but it's also created mental health struggling, or even ill mental health. But one of the things you will see when someone is struggling with mental health or is ill mental health, as an illness, is that it is a very, very wearing process. It is a constant battle. I don't know if you've ever been to a mental health course I've done. You've probably heard me say mental health interferes with the way we think and behave, which is every aspect of our human being. So it's their war, so it's a really hard thing. It's a constant battle. The smallest things can be a mountain to climb. The smallest things can be a mountain to climb. And so there is something of, not being put off by the difficulty and keep going until the solution, even if you smash on the roof. There is something really important in that. And equally, from our side, perhaps supporting other people, this is just as important. Because it might take hundreds of times of offering our support in big and small ways until someone is ready to grasp, because we just happen to find them at the exact right time, things to line up. So, really happy to said something really important. Okay. So there's lots to learn from the stories. There's lots to learn from the stories in the theological sense as well. And there's a lot to learn from them in a general life sense. Yeah? These ones aren't all about mental health. Right? Maybe the closest one is that story in the back, which is actually about not being able to conceive. Yeah? But don't forget, and this is where the workshop is about, I should say something about it, that the most important part of this exercise is that you sit down, that you give the meaning a way of discussing what is in people's minds. Let it resonate, let it get messy, and every thought that comes is okay. You also be very much aware that if you discuss these things around the table, I think that's true now as well, you might have thought something that you didn't say. Technically a lot. So just because someone hasn't said something doesn't mean it hasn't resonated, or they haven't taken note of it, or it might not resonate with them tomorrow. But going through this process is very therapeutic, and it is part of that sentiment. And I would say, as a youth worker, children worker, or chaplain, whatever it is you do, try to make sure that you take all those ideas at face value, and not to make fun of them, to laugh about them, because they might be just the thing that person needed to come to the next step. I hope this workshop has given you some permission to do this, and also to encourage you to trust the process. Sense making, please believe me, after working with Alpha for so long, sense making of your experience is one of the most important things about mental health. Because it isn't just when you're ill, it is also afterwards that you have to come to terms with things. So trust the process, this is safe to do, and believe that it works, believe that it changes things, and draw the faith in a healthy way by doing this into the conversation about mental health with young people, with your children, or for yourself. I hope this will help. If not, I had a lovely time. Thank you very much.